I love it when a new brand contacts me and says they've got some new products coming out and they want someone to showcase them out to their audience. And that's exactly what Arkpax did. They said they've got a new lineup of portable power stations coming out, their Core lineup, and they've got a Core 300 and a Core 1200 and a pretty neat solar panel, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at. Now in this video we're going to focus on the Core 300, and then check the channel. I'm going to have reviews also on the Core 1200, and when I review the Core 1200, I'm going to also test out their 200 watt solar panel. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and do that now, or just check out the channel and ring that notification bell if you want to, so you know when the new review videos come out. But like I said, we're going to be testing out the Core 300, checking out all of its features, checking out all of its specs, giving it some good tests. So let's get to it. Hey everybody, it's Chris from FamilyGeekery, and today we're going to be checking out the Arkpax Core 300 portable power station. And like I said, this came to me from Arkpax. They contacted me, said they'd like for me to showcase their new products and test them out, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, as always, this complete review is my review only. Arkpax doesn't get to see the video before it's posted, and no money is exchanged hands. So let's start off by taking a look just at the unit itself here. And this is a nice portable unit, only 8.8 pounds. So it's got a nice handle here, very lightweight, very portable, easy to carry around. Just for reference, this is my phone here. So this is like an iPhone 14 Pro or something. So not the XL, not the taller phone, but you can see it's about the same height as my phone and just a little bit wider than it. So very portable. We'll go over all the specs so you know how much battery it's got and how much power it can provide. But it's got everything you need right up front here. It's got a display, all of our outputs, all of our inputs. And then as we go around the back here, we've got some vent on the sides. We've got a light on the back here. And then another vent on this side. And really that's about it. So portable, very intuitive. Let's go over some of the specs. Now with a name like Core 300, you would expect that it's a 300 watt device, and that's exactly what it is. So the output of the AC inverter is 300 watts, and it says it's pure sine wave. Once we do some tests, I'll see if that looks to be true. I've got no reason to believe it's not. So 300 watts coming out of the inverter for any AC devices that you use. Now for a device like this, 300 watts is about the average output that I would expect for something this size. Now, it's not an output that I would actually use, because if you're using something that's 300 watts, you're going to chew through the battery pretty quick. So the two things that are most important on these power stations is the power output, which we said is 300 watts AC, and then the battery life, which is 192 watt hours. And that 192 watt hours of battery, it is lithium iron phosphate, so you're going to get 3,000 charges before it starts degrading down to 80% of its life. So they usually call that like a 10-year battery. And that would be if you're charging it and recharging it every day. Now 192 watt hours means that if I plug something into this that took 192 watts, it would last for 1 hour. So it's just how many watts times how many hours is your battery life. So if you use something that was maybe just 100 watts plugged in here, then it would last for about 2 hours. And you can do some simple math from there to find out about how long you expect this to work. Now, device like this, just to keep your expectations in the right place, this is perfect for camping if you need to keep your devices like your phones and tablets charged up. It's perfect for like home emergencies. Again, the same thing. Plug in a couple small lights, keep your devices plugged in, keep your cable modem going, that kind of stuff. And depending on if you have like a CPAP machine or something like that that you need to use either in a hotel room or while you're camping, you'll want to see what kind of power draw that has on it and do some quick math to see if this is going to last long enough for you. Now what this is not intended for is, and I'll go over some of the questions I get all the time, charging your electric car? No, that's not going to work. Running a big power drill or a floor tile cutter or a paint mixer? No, you're going to want something bigger than this. But like I said, super portable, perfect for camping, emergency use at home, and sometimes I'll grab something like this, throw it in the car for a long road trip. That way we can keep things charged up and even have the kids charge things in the back seat without having to bug us for the cigarette lighter cable. So 300 watts output, 192 watts of battery. Let's talk about some of the other features and specs, and then we'll do some testing. Now over on the right hand side here, we've got all of our DC stuff. So we've got a 12 volt, basically cigarette lighter port or car accessory port. That's going to be 12 volts at 8 amps, so about 96 watts total. And it's got its own separate button to turn it on and off. Then we've got a couple of USB-A's here. It says 18 watts max. We've got a single USB-C output here, which says 65 watts max. And then we have a XT60 input, which would be good for either a solar panel or a car charger. And it's got an impressive range of 12 to 60 volts, up to 12 amps, with a total max input of 180 watts. Now, something this size usually has like a 100 watt max input on the solar input, and it's usually down in like the 12 to 30 range. So we're going to test that out because that is pretty nice. That gives you a lot more options on what kind of solar panels to use. And then the last thing, as far as specs go, is underneath here is your AC input. And it says right on there, AC input 100 to 120 volts. And it's going to charge in at 180 watts max. So with 180 watt input from your wall power, you can bring this thing up to full charge in a little over an hour. Alright, so enough talking about specs. Now that we understand all of those, let's go ahead and do some tests. So let's go ahead and start by charging this thing up and testing the inputs for the charging. Alright, now one thing we forgot to talk about was what this comes with. When you unbox it, you're going to find obviously the power station itself. You're going to find the user manual, and then you're going to find a short charging cable. So this is just your regular AC charging cable with this time of plug on it, and that goes right into the front here. Now I've already got one plugged into my bench, so we'll use that just for convenience factor. So let's go ahead and plug this in, see if it wakes it up and starts charging it. And sure enough it does. So here's our first look at the screen. We've got a battery indicator here on the left. We've got a watt meter here on the right, which in this case is showing how many watts is coming in. And we're already up to 150 watts charging, and it says 50%. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let this run a little bit because we've obviously got the little 4-bar display here, which would be your 25, 50, 75, 100. We don't have a timer that tells us how long it's going to take to charge all the way up. And one thing I was going to check is, because it said 50, that was just pure coincidence. I was going to see if this was actually just going to show us 50, 75, and 100, but we can already see it's climbed up to 51%. So that's good. It's going to give you an accurate representation. So at 51%, we're looking at, about a half an hour or so, a little bit more than a half an hour to charge this thing all the way up. So without the little timer on here, you just have to do the quick math to find out how long it's going to take. But as soon as I plugged it in, it started charging pretty close to its max. And I do hear and feel a little fan. It's not super loud. You probably can't even hear it picking up on the microphone. But we do have a little fan in here keeping the internals cool. Now, as far as why it's charging at this 130 watts instead of 180, there could be several things that affect that. It could be the temperature of the batteries. It could be the state of charge, which it may vary depending on how charged up it is. And it's not documented in the user manual as far as what would affect that charging speed. But I'm not super upset with the fact that it's only charging at 130. In all honesty, the slower you charge these batteries, the healthier it is for them. And 130 versus 180, there is a little bit of a difference there, but it's not going to make or break it. So let's go ahead and check out this input here next, which is an XT60 port, and test to see how charging over DC is going to work. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is test out this XT60 input with a car charger. Now this cable didn't come with it, but you can pick these up on Amazon for about 10 to 20 bucks. And I'll leave some links down below, but it's basically an XT60 connector on one side and a cigarette lighter connector on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in here to this input. And off camera I've got a 12 volt source, so I'll go ahead and plug that in. And we should see that start to charge. Now before, when we saw this blanked out before, it's because this is the countdown timer for how long the battery is going to last. Now when we were charging over AC, and now that we're charging over DC, you can see that it's blanked out because it's charging up. So it's going to last forever, obviously. Once we plug something in and use this to output power, then we'll see how many minutes it calculates out as to how long it can output. So you can see it climbed right up to 92 watts. Now, what's interesting is this is a combined input that goes from 12 to 60 volts and up to 12 amps. So if this was pulling 12 amps from this cable right now, first of all, it would blow my cigarette lighter port, because those are usually only rated for 10 amps. And it didn't blow it, and it would also be going up to like 144 watts, because that 12 volts times the 12 amps. So that's telling me that there must be something inside here that knows if it sees somewhere around probably 12 to 14 volts to limit the input to like 8 amps. And that's what we're seeing right here. So that 12 volts coming into 92 watts, that's pretty close to that 8 amps limit. So that works great. We're charging up. We're up to 56% now. And like I said, this is something that's very common. You can charge this thing up while you're driving down the road, and you can see the screen timed out. But you're driving down the road, maybe from one campsite to another, and you plug this into your cigarette lighter, whether it's in the front of your car or sometimes in the back of your SUV or minivan or something. They've got a cigarette lighter port that you can plug into and charge it back up as you're driving down the road. So that works great. So let's go ahead and test out something a little higher voltage. Now, I'm not going to take it outside with a solar panel because it's really not great weather right now, but I am going to bring in a power supply and test this. So let me get that set up and I'll be right back. Alright, so I've set up a little power supply here with variable voltage and current, and I've got that hooked up to a cable here that's XT60 input into the power station. And you can see I've got this set for 12 volts. I've got a 5 amp limit and it's going a little bit over that. That's fine. And it says we're outputting about 65 watts. It's a pretty long cable that I'm using, so we're going to lose a little bit on that. And that's why we see about 60 watts coming in. Now, some solar panels are set up for 12 volts. A lot of the ones that you'll find, in retail stores that are used to kind of, keep the batteries charged on your RV or camper or something. But once you start getting into, real solar panels for, camping and stuff, they'll usually be about 18 volts. So let's go ahead and crank up the voltage here, and we'll bring that up to 18. And again, I still got a 5 amp limit on here. So the voltage is going to go up, and we'll let this climb up here and see what it levels out at. And as it's climbing up here, we're going to get up to about 18 volts, somewhere around 5 amps, so it should be around 90 watts or so. And as it's climbing up, it's definitely climbing up over here. So we're up to about 90 watts right now, and we still got a little bit to go. There we go, we're at 18, and we got about 92 watts coming in. But we want to test the full input range of this. It said it goes up to 60 volts. Now, you're not going to have a 60 volt solar panel, usually one of the camping ones, one of the little portable ones, but you may have a couple 100 watt panels that are 24 volts each. And in this case, you can set up 2 of them in series. So let's go ahead and crank it up to 24 volts. And let that continue to climb up. So this would be one 24 volt panel, still limiting at 5 amps. And most portable 100 watt panels are going to be somewhere in that 20 to 24 volts with about 5 amps. And we're seeing, yep, no problem. We got a little over 100 watts coming in. So let's go ahead and crank it up to where we might have 2 of those 24 volt panels in series. So let's crank this all the way up to 48 volts. Alright, so as this climbs up, now we just got the fan kicked on. So as we got about 130 watts, the fan kicked on. And that's good. But as this climbs up here, we can see it jumped right up to 48 volts. And it limited the current down, or it stopped the current down to about 3 amps. So this thing was smart enough to know, hey, I'm getting 48 volts. I don't want to keep on calling for 12 amps or 10 amps or 5 amps, because 48 times 5 is going to be over the input limit of this, which we said was 180 watts. So it's interesting that it kind of snapped right at 3 amps. I wonder if there's some voltage range in here that has a current limiter that bases it on how many volts it's seeing. And we may never get up to 180 volts or 180 watts here at this 48 volts because it looks like it's limiting it to 3 amps. But still, 140 watts coming into a small station like that, that's a pretty good spec. Now let's go ahead, just for fun, and bring this up to 58. And see if it holds. Okay, we did drop down to 2.5 amps. So we're pretty close to that 60 volt limit. And the good thing is yes, it's definitely taking that full input range of voltage. Nothing, popped or fried or any kind of circuit prevention, input prevention happened. So yeah, you can definitely string a couple solar panels together And even if they're two 100 watt panels, it's going to limit it down to a safe input here, and they call that overvolting your input. That way, if you have any kind of shading, or if you have a cloud come by and partially obstruct some of your solar panels, it's still going to find the right voltage range and the right current range to bring this in. So this has an MPPT controller inside here, and it's working great. So I'm pretty impressed for a small little device like this that it's got a really decent range and a pretty smart MPPT controller. So we've tested both the inputs, the AC input, the DC input. It's time to start testing some outputs. Alright, we're going to start by testing out the AC inverter here, the AC output. And to do that, I've got my trusty little dipper here, which is just a small crock pot to warm up some dip or something. And I'm using this because I know what kind of power it's going to pull on the low and the high setting, and I can usually tell the quality of the inverter based on how many watts it's pulling. Now let me explain that a little bit. If I plug this into the wall, I can expect to see, a certain amount of wattage at both of these power levels, and I've used enough time to know what that is. And so when I plug it into something that has an inverter, if I see those powers go lower, then I know the inverter just maybe isn't converting well. There's different reasons why it may not look exactly right. So that's what we're going to do. Let's wake this guy up here. Let's go ahead and plug this in. And we're not going to get close to that 300 watts. But this will be a good test to see how stable it is at the wattage that we pick. So let's go ahead and turn on our inverter. And now that the inverter is on, we can see that this right here has changed a little bit because it is drawing some power. So just sitting here, even though it's not turned on yet, it is drawing some power because the inverter is turned on. So the batteries know that they are depleting. Now a lot of power stations don't do that. They won't show any kind of output when there's nothing plugged in. But we see 0 watts, and we see that our time has decreased. So let's go ahead and turn this on to low and see what kind of watt rating we get here. And that's about what I was expecting. So about 89 watts coming out. It says it's going to work for about 71 minutes. And when I had this turned off before, I think there's a little hour indicator here that was showing 4 hours. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's turn that off. And sure enough, yeah, it says hours. So 14 hours just sitting here with no load on it once we turn it on. And again, we're only at 62% because we just charged it up a little bit. We've got 70 minutes, plenty of time to go ahead and heat up some queso if we're out tailgating somewhere or out camping somewhere. So let's go ahead and turn this up to high. And this number is going to drop down because now our power rating has gone up to 120 watts, and that's about what I was expecting. And it says it can do that high power for 53 minutes. And so far at this 120 watts or so, no fan yet, so it seems to be handling it just fine. So yeah, it's working great. Now what I want to do now is, let's turn this off. I'm going to plug the charging cable back in because this has a UPS function. And according to the documentation, it's got a 10 millisecond cutover. Now right now we're just charging because nothing is turned on. So it says it's going to run forever. It's charging, here we are, charging at 176 watts. So let's go ahead and turn on our load now. And this is on, but it's not showing any kind of change in the display here. So I'm guessing this is just completely bypassing. And it says it can bypass up to 3 amps, which would be over 300 watts, which is more than your capacity of this plug anyways. And then it said that it's got a 10 millisecond cutover, so if we lost power suddenly, not even a blip. Of course, something like a computer would be a little bit more sensitive to that 10 millisecond cutover, but it went from being powered up and charging to continuing to output its power. And now we can see we've got 53 minutes left at that high power. So it worked just great. Now let me go ahead and grab a tiny space heater I've got, and we'll see if we can get this power up a little bit higher. So let me set that up and I'll be right back. Alright, so here's a tiny little space heater plugged into the AC port. Now this has 2 speed settings. At the high speed it's around 500 watts, so we're not going to do that. So let's put it on the low speed and see what happens. And we're going to get right up close to that maximum here. We're looking at 260 watts or so, and it's handling it just fine. Of course, we're only going to have 22 minutes of heat. That's why you never want to use a space heater with something small like this. Even the big power stations aren't going to run this thing for very long. But at least if you had an emergency, you can get about 300 watts worth of heat for probably a little over half an hour if this thing was fully charged up. So it's working great. So next up, let's go ahead and test our DC output. We're going to test that USB-C output. Alright, to test the USB-C output, which is supposed to have a 65 watt max, we're going to go ahead and use this Anker Solix DC charger here just to test it out. It's got 140 watt maximum input, so I can plug this in and it'll tell me probably how many watts are coming out on this screen, how many watts are coming in on this screen. So let's check it out. So go ahead and plug it in, hit the button for USB-C, and this is going to turn on these USB-C ports here, or USB A and C ports. And right away we got 60 watts coming out of here, we got 62 watts coming in here. So obviously we're not gaining power in this cable here. There is probably just a little calibration difference between the two, but that is pretty darn close. 61 watts, 62 watts, it's all pretty close. But yeah, it's perfect for high-powered tablets. Even some laptops are, take less than 60 watts. A Steam Deck or an ROG Ally, some kind of handheld gaming device, would be perfect for that. And even if you had like a MacBook Pro that needs 96 watts, it'll still charge it. And the Apple will definitely probably recognize this as being a 65 watt charger. It just won't charge it as fast as its normal 96 or 80 watt, whatever kind of version it's used to. So the last thing I'm going to test is going to be this output here, the 12 volt output. I'm going to use that same cable I used before to test the input. I'm just going to go out of here into here. This has an XT60 on it, so we'll be able to see what the output is on this side, what the input is on this side. So let me grab that cable, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I got my cable plugged in here on the XT60 side of this Anker Solix. So we're going to plug in this cigarette lighter port here. Now I was wrong, this button right here, I didn't read it right. This turns on and off this port here. I think the USB ports work as soon as you turn the power on to the station. But let's go ahead and plug this in. I'm already turned on. And it jumped right up to 104 watts output. So this is 12 volts, 8 amps, so somewhere around 96 watts total. And we're seeing 96 watts come in here. So it works exactly as expected. Now, one other feature that I noticed, I think it said in the manual, that every time we push one of these buttons, we hear a beep. And you might not want that. Now, when I review the big brother of this one, the 1200, there's a button right on the front that says beep on off. And there's no button on this one. But I think it said if we push this button and hold it for a couple seconds, it'll beep to confirm the change, and it will turn off the beep. So now if I hit this to turn on the inverter, we got the light on, but there was no beep. Let's see if it changed the beep of the DC also. And sure enough, we just killed the DC output, and there's no beep, and there we turned it back on. So it says the default is to have that beep on, but you can change that with a long press. The beep confirms it. This is still on, so let's turn it off. And there you go. So I think that's a great little feature to add in there, because sometimes you want to know when you hit these buttons that it's actually turning on, because sometimes it takes a little delay before it powers up the circuit or whatever, and you don't want to keep on pressing the button not knowing if it's turning on or off. But maybe you've got this in a tent and you got people sleeping and you don't want, every time you push the button here to see what the screen says, you don't want to have that beep. You can go ahead and turn that beep off. And you can check your screen without bugging anybody. So that's really cool. Alright, so I think we tested out everything we can on this little guy here, and it's time for some final thoughts. Now, of course, these final thoughts are just to fully inform you as to what all the features are and what all the specs are and how well everything works. I never tell you guys, hey, you need to go buy this thing. You just need to take all the information I give you and determine if this is a device that meets your needs, or if you're looking at buying it, hopefully to answer a whole bunch of your questions. But that being said, there will be some links down in the description below on where you can find this and some accessories that I think that will go along great with this, like that car charging cord. But yeah, as far as final thoughts, this thing, for its size, it's got some great specs. It did everything that we thought it would do. It does everything that it advertises it will do. All the outputs and inputs match the specs. It put out plenty of power, and more impressively, it brought in plenty of power. I think that's the most impressive part for me, is that solar input. Now, as far as where this thing is going to have its limits, that's obviously going to be the power output and the battery size. Of course, we talked about the use cases and what you can expect to use this for already. A lot of these that start in that 300 watt range all have very similar specs. This one, again, has a much more flexible solar input, but you've got to already know what you're going to be plugging into this thing when you buy it. And like I said, for keeping some small devices, phones, tablets, that kind of thing, charged up, running some LED lights in a power outage or on a camping trip, all of that's going to be perfect. So really the limiting factor of this is going to be the battery, that 192 watt hours, but that is plenty of power again for what you expect to be doing with this. And on the bright side, it keeps this thing really light, less than 9 pounds, super portable, easy to carry around. That's going to be the strong selling point. So I think that's going to wrap it up for this review. If you have any questions that I didn't go over, go ahead and drop those down in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. Go ahead and check out the rest of the channel. Lots of other reviews on stuff like this and tips and tricks for solar generators and power stations and power banks. And like I said, the big brother, check out the review I'll be doing on that. If it's not up right now, it will be in a couple days. And that is the Core 1200. But thank you again for Arkpax for sending this out for review. I had some fun testing this little guy. Hopefully you had some fun watching it. If you did, I appreciate a thumbs up. That helps out the channel. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. I thank you as always for watching. And until next time, peace out and geek out.